This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. The President has certainly been having a great time. He busted out his signature moves, dancing with sailors while celebrating the Navy's 250th birthday. Look at this. Look at those smiles. They love him. President Trump also promised across-the-board pay rises for US service members.
The U.S. Navy always stands for America. As your commander-in-chief, I will always stand for you. I promise you that.
Also on the show, Tim Walz has done some soul-searching after last year's election loss, and he believes he wasn't a great running mate because he's too nice.
I think she has every right to be critical. I do think I let her down on a couple things. And I warned them, my Minnesota nice thing is, if somebody's being nice to me, I'll be nice to them.
Yeah, that has to be it. And Australia's e-safety commissioner attempts to censor the stabbing death of Irina Zarutska right around the world. Also, almost 3 million people in the UK say no to digital IDs. And later in the show, activist Greta Thunberg speaks out after being deported from Israel.
People were not being treated well. I was not able to say goodbye to people, and I don't know what's happening. And there were many issues.
Joining us now is Hilary Fordwich, president and founder of Strellmark. Hilary, it's great to see you again. President Donald Trump has promised across-the-board pay rises for every sailor and service member in the United States, and he made this announcement at the 250th birthday of the Navy. It was certainly received well. The crowd was cheering. And Trump also touted his $1 trillion investment in military resources, including building a fleet of ships on American soil. Now, Hilary, the Navy has also achieved its best recruitment year ever this year.
Oh, yes. He's going to he's reshoring all of the manufacturing. He's going to build a far stronger Navy, and again, back on US soil. And also those pay rises you mentioned, you're right, they're for the Navy and they're across all the military service areas. He's a big proponent of the military, and he believes, as Reagan said, peace through strength. And of course, the Department of Defense has been renamed the Department of War under the leadership of Pete Hegseth, who was serving in the military. And last but not least, what I love about what they're saying is not only should there be high standards and the same standards for men and women, you can serve if you can do exactly the same sort of standards. So no more of the sort of DEI nonsense, but also to the generals. We shouldn't have fat generals and we shouldn't have fat service members. So they're all on alert, Gabriella.
Wasn't it a brilliant speech by Pete Hegseth? This is what he had to say at the Navy's birthday.
Your diversity is not your strength. Your strength is your unity of purpose, your shared mission, your love of country.
Hilary, he's just on fire at the moment. That speech coming just days after he said no more fat troops and declaring that woke is well and truly over in the military.
Yes, he did. And as I said, he said the same standards across for men and women. And by the way, as a woman, I mean, I think we should have women in the military if you can do the same as a man. Who has ever said, no, actually, if my house is burning down and I need people to run in and pick up my family members and rush them out, no, I want someone who can't lift someone. Same in the military. We need people who can meet the standards. That's what they're not anti-women. They're saying meet a certain standards. And by the way, there are some very strong women out there. It's not anti-women. Just a certain standard level, which I think is appropriate.
Absolutely right. Now, I need your help. I don't know who is more delusional, failed presidential candidate Kamala Harris or failed vice presidential candidate Tim Walz. And unfortunately for us here in Sydney, Kamala Harris is coming back to Australia in just a few months' time, and she's been on this media blitz promoting her book 107 Days and giving speeches where she's desperately trying to rewrite history. Take a listen to this.
And here's the other thing that is quite unprecedented. And it was the tightest, closest presidential election in the 21st century. He does not have a mandate. That is not a mandate. That is not a mandate.
Hillary, she seems to have forgotten that Donald Trump won all 7 swing states and the popular vote. Trump also gained ground in every state and most counties. I mean, there are clearly people around Kamala Harris trying to convince her to run again, seeing as she's giving speeches like this. And now Tim Walz has responded to criticism of his performance during the election campaign, and this was his self-reflection. It wasn't lying about his military record or performing terribly in his debate against J.D. Vance. He was suggesting, or even I should say, suggesting that Republicans are Nazis. But his self-reflection is that he's just too nice.
As far as the book and things like that go, I think she has every right to be critical. I do think I let her down on a couple things. And I warned them, my Minnesota nice thing is, if somebody's being nice to me, I'll be nice to them.
You're talking about the debate with J.D. Vance where she
these people have
you.
seen me debate, a teacher in me, and this is nervous tick or habit that we have when you're a teacher. When someone else is speaking next to you, you instinctively nod and listen and try and listen.
Hillary, I mean, listening to both of them, I mean, it's a little bit triggering. It brings us back to what we had to listen to all throughout last year in the lead up to the November election. And both of them, they're trying to rewrite history, just trying to paint a completely different picture of themselves. What did you make of it?
Yes. Well, first of all, actually, they make Hillary Clinton, who kept whining about not winning, look actually really pretty sane. So she's the one that benefits from that. And then with regard to Kamala going down under to visit you, lucky you, Gabriella, and why don't you keep her while she's down there? But now a few facts. And that I always love that when somebody once said that, facts are very stubborn things. They're irrefutable. You're right. She didn't win any states, but also she did not win the popular vote. She did not win the Electoral College. Since 1932, Herbert Hoover, she did not flip any counties whatsoever. She lost all the swing states. It was an absolute national mandate for Donald Trump. So there was no way under any circumstance that it was close whatsoever. And he absolutely had a mandate. She also lost the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. So that is what you consider a mandate, yes. And then as for Tim Walz, Tampon Tim, he cannot seem to do the right thing. And whether it was stomping around in a field and not being able to even work his gun, pretending to be, a macho man, everything he does really looks somewhat pathetic. And all I can say is I'm actually really glad. I'm really happy to see those clips because it's a reminder that we should be grateful every day that we have President Trump.
Oh, 100%. It really is. Now, let's talk about Elon Musk versus Netflix. Last week, Netflix shares saw its biggest weekly decline in 6 months. The stock price dropped by more than 2%. And it comes after Elon Musk began campaigning against the streaming giant over its trans content that's in children's programs. Here's just one example of what's on there.
It's not the park. It's me. I'm trans, Norma. And everyone at school knows, and everyone at home knows. And being here, it's like a whole new place. I can just be Barney, and I can choose if and when I tell people. I've never been happier. And that's saying something when I spent today chased by terrifying zombie mascots. Pugsley reminded me how important it is to live your life without apology. So I think I gotta give living here a shot. Don't you?
That is a show on Netflix, Dead End Paranormal Park, and it is advertised for 7-year-olds. Now, the show's creator, Hamish Steele, who also allegedly mocked the murder of Charlie Kirk, that's the show's creator. Now, this is a huge movement, what Elon Musk is doing. It's been one of the top trending issues on X for days now. We know that Netflix has hundreds of millions of users. It's a platform with massive influence. And we're hearing from a lot of concerned parents about the content that's deliberately being produced to push this pro-trans agenda to children, Hillary.
Yes, absolutely. And particularly those shows it's approved or they're for children 7 and older. How absolutely ghastly for children that are that young. They actually, I mean, I have children and children that young, they aren't even talking about sexuality or thinking about it. So first of all, it's appropriate even to be talking about anything that's sexual. And then the other issue I have is, well, and to your point, by the way, there's a hashtag cancel Netflix, which is spread like is an actual phenom. But then their stock is down 2%, Netflix. So Elon Musk is really having an impact on their bottom line. The other issue I have is layering on top of this, you look across the board at Netflix and what the average person is watching is literally all rubbish. This is rubbish with a massive left-leaning thing. But it's such a pity that people aren't watching more history, anything that's non-fiction, learn about the world. And there's so much about the world that's really interesting and can be fascinating. And it actually is, you're growing and learning. And one of the things I really do think, I don't think it's just a conspiracy theory. I think this is part of the dumbing down of the masses. The less people know about history, the easier it is to manipulate them. And this is part of that, I do believe.
Let's talk about what's going on in the UK. Keir Starmer's digital ID is being slammed. Now, just over a week ago, Keir Starmer announced that this digital ID would be mandatory for workers in the UK. Now, anyone with common sense is clearly going to be against this just because of the level of control the government would get. Also, by forcing this digital ID on workers, there are huge concerns around privacy, surveillance and digital rights. Now, Keir Starmer's also being warned that this scheme could become a goldmine for hackers and scammers to steal your money. So there is this real risk of data breaches. And now 2.8 million people, nearly 3 million, have signed a petition against digital IDs. That does not surprise me, Hillary.
Yes, absolutely. And think about it. The biggest, scariest thing after the fact that the government has control and insight into absolutely everything, which is scary enough, talk about Big Brother, is for those that are actually the criminals. This is really easy to hack. Who doesn't think that there are hackers that are more sophisticated than the government? I think that this is very easy. And actually, the model is based on Estonia, where they've had terrible crimes against people, where they've had everything stolen, their funds stolen because of the hackers. So I think it exposes the average citizen to have everything wiped out. So I think that's very dangerous. And last but not least, I do believe that one of the huge backers of this is Larry Ellison, who's actually donated a huge amount. And there's sort of all these people that have a lot of, let's just say, selfish interests behind the push to this. And I think it's something that's dangerous, let alone the last but not least, very importantly, Big Brother seeing into absolutely everything. And also, of course, in the UK, they want to make it a cashless society so they can track absolutely everything everyone does.
Yeah, that is a hard no from me. Such a slippery slope there, and you are spot on. Hillary Fordwich, President and founder of Strelmark, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure, Gabriella, anytime.
Joining us now is Emily Jashinsky, host of After Party with Emily Jashinsky on MK Media. Emily, it is great to see you again. Let's start with the bill that has been written in honour of Irina Zarutska, who is, of course, the Ukrainian refugee who was horrifically stabbed to death on a light rail in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the mainstream media really refused to cover this murder for weeks and weeks. Now, North Carolina Governor Josh Stein has signed into law Irina's law, which includes an amendment that could allow North Carolina to resume capital punishment, including by firing squad. But Emily, the reforms will also see certain violent offenders denied cashless bail and will limit a judge's authority over pre-trial release. Now, cashless bail has become a big part of this conversation, seeing as the suspect in Irina Zarutska's killing, DeCarlos Brown Jr., had been arrested more than a dozen times, and he was released on cashless bail just not long before this attack.
And it happens over and over again in America's cities. I mean, here in Washington, D.C., we've dealt with this for years in some extremely just unbelievably tragic cases that are so frustrating because you look at these decisions that came down during a progressive policing experiment over the course of the last 10 years where people campaigned in these cities for district attorney jobs, mayoral jobs, and others, saying that they were going to fix the inequality system, the inequalities in the system, and they were going to make policing and justice more fair. And what ended up happening actually is that the experiment played out, and we saw cases like this, not just anecdotally pop up, but as a trend, and people are completely sick of it.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrific. Now, I want to get your thoughts on this because Australia's e-safety commissioner, she's known as E-Karen here, Julie Inman-Grant, has ordered social media platforms such as X to take down posts that show the stabbing of Irina Zarutska on that train in Charlotte. Now, there are threats of fines of $825,000 per day for each post. So there are plenty of concerns being raised about just how far Australia's e-safety commissioner is going here, if she thinks she controls the internet. And it's raised questions as to whether she's going to also censor white on black crime. And, you know, I think Australia's e-safety commissioner, in my opinion, is going way too far because also, Emily, if it wasn't for platforms such as X and this footage going viral, this story, it just would not have got the attention that it deserves.
Right. I mean, there's a much, much deeper problem here, especially in the United States, which is why do we have video of what happened with Daniel Penny, for example, with Irina, with Charlie Kirk? And it's because people are violating the law. And so I'm not at all sort of averse to the idea that maybe we should just personally be much more careful about the social media we consume and our own health, as whether, you know, watching these videos on a doom loop is personally good for anybody psychologically. Sure. I think that's a completely valid question. But if you are in America's cities, you can walk around and see this stuff happening. Of course, what happened with Irina was so graphic that it wasn't until people saw the video. I mean, this case is one of the better examples that people barely cared about it until the video went viral around the country. And so the video was extremely powerful.
It was, and it was people, it was conservative influencers, it was people like Charlie Kirk and Elon Musk that was sharing the video and actually making enough noise about it that finally CNN and mainstream media outlets actually started to cover it. Now, Seattle's Democratic Mayor Bruce Harrell is in the spotlight after declaring that he has no desire to put repeat criminal offenders in jail. Listen to this.
The criminal system has had a disparate impact on black and brown communities. Let me lead with that. So when this person is committing 6 or 7 crimes, I don't know his or her story. Maybe they were abused as a child. Maybe they're hungry. So my remedy is to find their life story to see how we could help first. I have no desire to put them in jail, but I need to protect you.
No desire. Yeah, he said this in a debate as he runs for re-election, and it's certainly a difficult argument to hear when we've just seen so many violent crimes being carried out by repeat offenders, just as we were speaking about recently what happened to Irina Zarutska, who was stabbed to death by a suspect with a long history of arrests, Emily.
Well, I mean, folks like him should look at what happened with London Breed in San Francisco. They should look at the backlash in Los Angeles, in Oakland. Look what happened to Chesa Boudin. There are examples just in the last 5 years, especially post-COVID, of where even left-leaning communities, places like Seattle, have said enough. We have to stop this experiment because people are being caught as collateral in this social justice laboratory experiment that's being run by progressive mayors and district attorneys. So to say any of that, I mean, nobody is committing these crimes because they are hungry. If you walk around these cities, you see that people are committing these crimes for very sad reasons. And it's because they are addicted, and it is because they have deep mental illness problems that have gone untreated, like in the case of Irina. Yeah. It's insane that that person was out on the street.
It absolutely was. And, you know, the fact that he was arrested, I think it was 14 times, was out on cashless bail. It ended so tragically. Emily, can you bring us up to speed on this US government shutdown? It's day 6 of the government shutdown, and it's estimated that this is costing taxpayers $400 million every day to pay federal employees who are not actively working. Now, the Trump administration will start mass layoffs of federal workers if Trump decides that negotiations with Democrats to end a partial government shutdown are going nowhere. What do you suspect is going to happen here?
Although Republicans see it potentially as a way to end permanent waste. They believe Russ Vought, who's the Office of Management and Budget Director and a very hardcore sort of MAGA intellectual architect, believes that the shutdown actually could be an opportunity because of certain laws that are vested in the executive branch to get rid of some federal employees permanently, to furlough federal employees. And so this period, nobody really has incentive to come to the table right now because Democrats insist on these provisions that will allow for non-citizens, or in some cases asylum seekers, and in some cases illegal immigrants, to benefit from healthcare subsidies. And on the other hand, Republicans say, okay, if you guys are insisting on that, we now have an opportunity to make some of these cuts permanent and do DOGE 2.0. So I think in the days to come, that's probably what we're going to see. Republicans are going to call Democrats bluff and say, all right, well, we are going to actually start taking a hatchet to some of your beloved parts of the government.
Okay, we'll be watching it very closely. Now, conservative journalist Nick Sauter was taken into custody in Portland during a night of chaotic protests outside an ICE facility. Now, we've been seeing the videos, the images of these wild protests night after night, and Nick Sauter was charged with disorderly conduct in the 2nd degree, and he was then released. And he released a video appearing to show that he was the one being targeted by Antifa-like thugs. This is what Caroline Levitt had to say.
Just last night, we saw an extremely troubling incident where conservative journalist Nick Sorter was captured on video being taken into custody by the Portland police after he was ambushed by Antifa and was defending himself from these assaults. But instead of arresting these violent mob members night after night after night who are ravaging this community, the police arrested a journalist who was there trying to document the chaos, and everyone in this room should be extremely concerned about that.
Emily, it is troubling, you know, if you're obviously a high-profile journalist. I'd love to get your thoughts on what happened to Nick. But Caroline Levitt went on to say that this incident shows a really troubling trend where left-wing mobs are trying to decide who can visit and live in their city and who can't, and also that the president is now reviewing funding for Portland, according to Caroline Levitt, saying that we will not be funding any states that allow anarchy, Emily.
Well, Antifa groups notoriously despise journalists. I know one particular journalist on the day of Donald Trump's first inauguration, when D.C. was ransacked, downtown D.C. was ransacked, but nobody remembers it, of course, because it was violence from the left. Cars were set on fire. This journalist was hit across the back of the head and had to go to hospital for taking a picture of Antifa. If you've ever covered Antifa protests that often turn into riots, you know that they coordinate particularly to block journalists from covering them. And sometimes that gets violent. So I would not be surprised at all if Sorter was merely trying to attempt to film Antifa. And they started an attack, because that's actually part of what some of them believe their obligation is to do in order to, as they see it, protect themselves and their identities from journalists, even though they're in public places and in cases like this, attacking public officials or public buildings. So that is something that over the years gets very little coverage from American journalists, despite the fact that it should probably get a lot, and we should be very concerned about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it appears that Nick Sorter was just doing his job, taking a photograph. Now, a federal judge has blocked Donald Trump's efforts to deploy National Guard troops into Portland. So US District Judge Karen Immergut ruled the action as unlawful, unconstitutional, and she essentially said there's no justification for the troops being sent there. Emily, from what I can see from over here, it looks like Portland needs all the help it can get.
Yeah, Portland is one of those cities where you go to certain parts and people on the left, people who live in Portland, this happened in DC during the COVID years as well, they tend to be wealthy and affluent, would take pictures and say, Portland is wonderful. Portland doesn't need any more help. But then you go to patches of the city and it's a dystopian hellhole. And Portland is one of those cases. Now, from what I hear, it's not like it was back in 2020, 21, 2022. Even so, when you look at what happens every single day with homelessness and drugs in broad daylight in Portland, and then see their inability to contain some of these pop-up Antifa demonstrations, obviously Portland has a serious problem. And I think, you know, whether someone agrees with the Trump administration's plan or not, Portland and Oregon Democrats, national Democrats, are missing an incredible opportunity and fueling a lot of this by not stepping in and saying, we are taking control. Maybe we don't need the president. It's the same thing in Chicago with J.B. Pritzker, but we're going to take control of our own city. Instead, they end up just attacking Trump and nothing gets done for the people of Portland.
Finally, President Trump has revealed when the UFC fight is going to be held, and it's going to take place on the South Lawn of the White House on June 14. Also happens to be his 80th birthday, and The View hosts are freaking out about this.
Sometimes you read the paper these days and it's like they're writing The Onion, you know, like how it's
and then
the
it's
headlines.
real.
No, it's like really real. It's like you laugh and then you realize it's not funny and all of the things. But it's because, like, Trump wants to host a UFC fight for his 80th birthday. That literally sounds like he's writing an SNL sketch. Like, that's actually true, you guys.
It is true?
Yes.
At the White House.
He wants to do, like, my dad had an 80th birthday.
Is he participating in it?
I don't know, but, like, who for your 80th birthday?
How many more years is that? 2 more? He'll be gone.
No, I think it's next year.
He'll be impeached.
Oh, Emily, the panic. I mean, they can't quite handle what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that Donald Trump is hosting this on his birthday, but I also think they say this sort of panic tone of saying it's like an SNL sketch continues to show they missed the point. Yes, he is writing it like an SNL sketch to generate that reaction from you at the View. And we're 10 years into Trump's political career and they still don't get that.
They're still taking the bait. Host of After Party with Emily Jashinsky on MK Media. Emily Jashinsky, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
It's been 2 years since the horrific October 7 terror attacks in Israel. I think we all remember where we were when we heard the news that Hamas terrorists launched the deadliest attack on Jews since the Holocaust. More than 1,200 men and women were killed, women were raped in one of the most evil acts imaginable. Joining us now is Joel Burney, Executive Manager at the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council. Joel, thank you so much for your time. Our hearts are certainly with everyone in Israel and all of our Jewish friends here in Australia and right around the world. Today I'm thinking about the family members of hostages who haven't seen their loved ones in 2 years and, of course, reflecting on the time I spent in Israel. I've said this before, but I've never felt anything as dark as visiting the site of the Nova Music Festival just months after that terror attack, where that festival became a killing field on October 7 and innocent people were captured and taken hostage. Joel, can I get your reflections today?
Well, thank you as always, Gabriella, for having me on. It's a very tough day for Jews worldwide. It's a very tough day for Israelis. It's a very tough day for Australian Jews. The horrific events of 2 years ago, we all remember, as you say, where we were. I have spent a lot of time in Israel since and exposed lots of Australians to the horrors of what happened, and it's just unfortunate that I don't think that any Australians who remember where they were on this day 2 years ago would have thought that we would be at this stage where Australian Jews are at 2 years later. It's been a tortuous and abundantly difficult period for Australian Jews in the shadow of, as you say, the most horrific attack on Jews since the end of the Holocaust. The explosion of anti-Semitism, which has been associated with the massacre on October 7, 2023, has been felt by Australian Jews more than many other Jews around the world. And it's a continuing issue that so many Australian Jews are feeling unsafe in their own country. And the solemn part of this day is, unfortunately, we have to share the podium with very unsympathetic and mean elements of Australian society that think that now is the time to not only celebrate what Hamas has done, but to rub that in the face of the Australian Jewish community. So I've got mixed feelings, Gabriella, sadness, deep sadness and sorrow, but I'm equally saddened by the state of affairs in our country right now.
Yeah, you mentioned the explosion in anti-Semitic attacks. I mean, just in the last 24 hours, a billboard has been vandalised with anti-Semitic graffiti in Fitzroy. The phrase "Glory to Hamas" was spray painted above a busy intersection in Fitzroy. And you mentioned the protests that are being planned. I mean, pro-Palestine activists are still trying to push ahead with this protest set to be at the Opera House, to Hyde Park this weekend. And we all remember the ugly scenes during the pro-Palestine protests that took place just days after the October 7 terror attack. And we've seen so many demonstrations here in Sydney and in different parts of Australia where there has been so many anti-Semitic chants being chanted, anti-Semitic symbols being held up, and a lot of support for Hamas, Joel.
Well, anti-Semitism has been normalised in Australia over the past 2 years, Gabriella. So these protest movements, we've been seeing a protest on a weekly basis in Melbourne, for instance. So Melbourne CBD has been a no-go zone for Jews for 2 years. The Premier is aware of it, the police are aware of it, but they seemingly don't have any tools in their toolkit to make it more free for Jews to be able to go to downtown Melbourne on a Sunday. The idea that in Sydney a protest would be organised in and around the anniversary of the massacre at the Opera House itself is purposefully designed to rub it in the face of Jewish community in Australia, but to also highlight and illustrate that they believe that they have won. They believe that they own the streets. They believe that they can chant death to the IDF, Zionists are terrorists, from the river to the sea, these genocidal statements on the streets of Sydney, Melbourne and elsewhere with full freedom. And the Opera House, we all remember the events of October the 9th, just a mere 48 hours after the massacre itself. These protesters hijacked the whole agenda by their violent chants, which also, the Attorney General of New South Wales warned Jews 2 years ago not to go to downtown Sydney for their own safety. So where have we come? What have we learned from those 2 years, both at a state and federal level? We have allowed these protests to continue. I do note that in New South Wales, they are challenging the protest location at the New South Wales Supreme Court. I believe it's been moved to the Court of Appeals for a hearing tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the idea that in this country that it is okay to celebrate the murder of 1,200 Jews at such iconic areas in Sydney, Melbourne or elsewhere in this great country, you would have thought that that unsavoury type of behaviour would have been called out and quashed 2 years ago, but still now we're still having to fight with these guys on the streets of Melbourne and Sydney and elsewhere. And we as a community and the Jewish community have had a gut feel, but I do suggest that the rest of Australia has had a gutful as well. Oh,
100%, Joel. Let's talk about the war in Gaza. It's interesting, all these pro-Palestine activists seem to be pretty quiet about Donald Trump's peace plan. If they really want to see the war in Gaza come to an end, you'd think there'd be a bit more support. But Trump has warned Hamas that it must immediately greenlight his plan to end the war in Gaza or all bets are off, as of course there is now this renewed hope that all 48 hostages could be coming home within days. Negotiators for Hamas, Israel and US officials are heading for talks in Egypt. Now, there are reports that Trump has also torn into Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in their latest discussion, telling the leader to stop being negative during a phone call. Now, this is, of course, very high stakes, Joel. What's your assessment of where this is at now?
So we have an abundance of cautious optimism in terms of the hopeful release of the hostages. So as you said, negotiating teams are in Egypt right now, where the details of the announced plan are hopefully going to be ironed out, where some type of agreement will be had, and hopefully those 48 hostages will be released in the coming week to week and a half. I would suggest that Hamas will try and delay that by utilising different tactics, suggesting that they can't find all the hostages or they've lost contact with those that were looking after them. But in terms of the immediate outcomes, the hope is that the hostages are going to be released and going to be released soon. In terms of the other elements of the plan, I think that we need to be a little bit more cautious into what Hamas is actually going to agree to. So Hamas's initial response to the plan clearly says that they want a continued role in the governance of Gaza. Now, that is a clear red line of President Trump. It's a red line of Benjamin Netanyahu for obvious reasons, but it's also a very clear red line to the Australian government as well, who has said hundreds of times that Hamas can have no role. So whether or not Hamas tries to pivot itself, to rebrand itself, but to still have some type of role in that governance, I think that they will try to they will try to manoeuvre for that. The other condition is demilitarization. The big question is, will Hamas agree to give up its arms and hand them over to another entity, or to give them to the stabilization force? I again would point to my cautious, I would say my pessimism on that. I'm unsure whether or not Hamas is going to agree to those terms, even with some of the language that they've used over the past week to week and a half. So there's a lot of detail to still be ironed out. The most immediate concern is the release of the hostages. But once they are released, we all have a collective responsibility, and mainly governments who are underwriting this peace deal, the West, behind President Trump, but along with the Arab countries and Turkey, that they remain steadfast in their condition that Hamas can have no role in the future governance of Gaza. If they roll on that or they show weakness on that, Hamas will exploit it, and then what you'll have is Hamas 2.0, and then within a couple of months or years after the Israeli withdrawal, we'll be back to exactly where we were on October the 6th, 2023, with rockets coming in from Gaza into southern Israel, and Hamas still holding control and governance control of the enclave. So there's still a hell of a lot to be done, but my hope is that there will be good news in the coming days. The final point is that I think that you don't want to underestimate too much about the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu. I understand that it gets headlines that Trump is, yelling or insulting or telling Bibi that he's always negative. I would suggest that their relationship is still very, very strong. And there's no doubt that Netanyahu believes that Trump currently has his back and has Israel's back. So I think that you'll see good things coming out of that relationship. I'm not too worried about the relationship between the president and the prime minister.
Joel, I have to ask you about Greta Thunberg. Israel has, of course, deported Greta Thunberg and more than 100 other activists who were detained after trying to breach the naval blockade of Gaza in what was another publicity stunt. Now, Greta Thunberg has spoken out, playing the victim again after being detained. This is what she had to say.
People were not being treated well. I was not able to say goodbye to people, and I don't know what's happening. And there were many issues.
When you say they're not treated well, what do you mean?
Well,
could you elaborate for us?
Obviously, in a very dehumanizing way. But of course, I have to stress nothing compared to what Palestinians are going through.
Joel, she claims she wasn't treated well. It's certainly hard to hear that while there are innocent people still being held hostage by Hamas terrorists. Now, Donald Trump has blasted Greta Thunberg. Take a listen.
She's just a troublemaker, she's no longer into the environment, now she's into this. She's a troublemaker. She has an anger management problem. I think she should see a doctor. She needs anger. If you ever watch her, she's a young person. She's so angry. She's so crazy. No, you can have her. She's just a troublemaker.
I think Donald Trump is saying what we're all thinking. But Joel, what do you make of Greta's latest stunt?
Well, it's clearly a stunt. Let's put a few things into context. So firstly, the flotilla had no aid. So they were claiming that they were coming to deliver essential aid to the enclave. There were many offers by the Israeli government and by other European powers to offload that aid and safely deliver that aid to the Palestinian people. There was no aid. This was entirely a PR stunt created by a little narcissist, by Greta, who wants to make herself the centre of attention, whilst all the other good motivation and momentum generated by President Trump's plan is being forgotten by these activists who care little for the Palestinian people and care nearly entirely about the delegitimization, the demonization of Israel. She is an attention-seeking troublemaker, as the president says. She is a narcissist who makes everything about herself and has no care whatsoever for the people of Palestine. The issues that I have with her is the amount of media attention that she gets. She has zero impact on this conflict. She has zero positive impact on the lives of Palestinians that she cares very little for. All she cares about is her own PR machine and her own narcissistic tendencies. And you'll see that through the rehearsed responses to what actually happened when they were detained. So all of the activists have collectively taken an oath to get behind this PR machine to do everything it can to discredit Israel. This was never about the Palestinians. This was never about the delivering of aid. This was entirely about Greta Thunberg and her useful idiots in generating PR for themselves. So I'm entirely happy with the actions of the Israeli government in detaining this flotilla. The fact if they were to make it to Gaza would set a terrible precedent, which would greatly complicate the current military actions in Gaza, and I don't think that the Palestinians in Gaza would want them either. So, this is just another stunt, completely for PR reasons. And please, you didn't get to say goodbye to your other captives. Cry me a bloody river.
Joel Burney, we have to leave it there. Executive Manager at the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabriella.
It's time for Media Meltdowns, and TDS suffering Hollywood celebrities are going crazy. Jane Fonda has come up with a not-so-original attack against the president, saying that he's a threat to democracy, while calling on Hollywood creatives to push back against him.
He is amassing power in a way that will destroy our democracy. And so we're going to stand up. You know, we're creatives, we're storytellers. We can do it creatively. We can have a good time while we do it. But we want to push back, and we want to model what creative, nonviolent, non-cooperation looks like. That doesn't mean just showing up for people who are under attack, like Jimmy Kimmel. A lot of us signed that ACLU statement protesting what happened to Jimmy Kimmel. But we want to also, we want to be proactive.
I mean, what happened to Jimmy Kimmel? He was suspended for a few days. It was not the end of free speech. And days after Jimmy Kimmel was back on air pretending to cry about Charlie Kirk for the first time ever and refusing to apologise to his family for lying about the murder, Jimmy Kimmel was all smiles with Colbert.
I mean, that son of a you know, is really unbelievable.
Mr. Son of a
I mean,
Mr. Son of a
His loyal... Yes, no, I never imagined that we'd ever have a president like this, and I hope we don't ever have another president like this again. I mean, I never even imagined there would ever be a situation in which the president of our country was celebrating hundreds of Americans losing their jobs. But somebody who took pleasure in that. That, to me, is the absolute opposite of what a leader of this country is supposed to be.
Actress Cynthia Nixon has shared with the world some of the things that she loves, and they include socialist New York City mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani, gender-neutral bathrooms, and a free Palestine. And actress Emma Watson has had a lot to say on the podcast episode she did with Jay Shetty. Not only did she open up on her public feud with J.K. Rowling, she spoke about her opinion of marriage and went so far to say that the pressure on young people to get married is violence and cruelty.
But there are some parts that, like, I was really still teasing out and figuring out. And I think it's such a violence and it's such a cruelty on people, and especially young people, I think, and especially women, to make them feel like they have no worth or like they haven't succeeded yet in life because they haven't forced to its culmination something that I just don't think can or should ever be forced.
Yeah, adults in the US are free to choose to marry or not, and as we know, marriage rates are significantly declining, so is the birth rate. And hearing Emma Watson just makes me miss hearing from the late Charlie Kirk, who would advocate for young people to get married and have a family. And I wonder if this is what Emma means by the cruel pressure that young people are facing.
Having children is more important than having a good career. I have 2 kids. I also have an amazingly blessed career. Our podcast is doing great, but my kids matter way more than how many social media followers that I have. And I would also tell young ladies, you can always go back to your career later, that there is a window where you primarily should pursue marriage and having children, and that is a beautiful thing. This is not about shaming. It's not about ridiculing. It's not about moralizing. It's about lifting up what is beautiful. And by the way, when we look at the mental health data, young women are not okay. Half, that is right, half of liberal white women say that they have some form of mental health issue that has been diagnosed by a doctor. What is the #1 thing that mental health professionals will tell you when it comes to mental health issues? Loneliness does not help. So maybe we should solve the loneliness epidemic by encouraging young ladies to get married and have children. It's good for them, it's good for America, and it's good for our future.
Joining us now is skynews.com.au columnist Louise Roberts. Louise, thank you so much for your time.
Great to see you, Gabriella.
Oh my gosh, listening to Charlie Kirk, you know, isn't he just brilliant, brings
Voice
back
of
some
reason.
common sense. And then you listen to Emma Watson. I mean, violence and cruelty, it's a bit extreme, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And who are these young people feeling pressured to get married? Who are these young women who feel they have no worth in life unless they are married? I mean, introduce me to them and I'll have a chat to them. This is crazy. But this is all those celebrities that you featured previously, so Jane Fonda and Cynthia Nixon, they've all got the same privilege problem. It's very easy to say these things when you're rich and famous. Now, in Emma's case, when she's saying that she's trying to conflate marriage with violence, that's so wrong. I mean, if she's got a problem with marriage, she should go after young girls who are forced into marriages when they're 8 or 10 years old, forced to marry 60-year-old men.
Does happen.
That's where she should be putting her energy and her profile and helping those poor young women in that case, not the average young woman who's thinking, yeah, I would like to marry my boyfriend and I would like to have children one day, I would like to marry my girlfriend, I'd like to have children one day, whatever the situation is, and they feel comfortable in creating a family unit, which, as Charlie illustrated so perfectly, is the core of stability in society, but it's the first thing that always comes under attack by these Hollywood elites.
Always, always. That's why we really miss voices like Charlie Kirk. They are so valuable in this space when you've just got these Hollywood celebrities clearly pushing some agenda. But speaking of marriages, of course, not all of them last, and Nicole Kidman has made her first public appearance just days after filing for divorce from Keith Urban. Now, she presented Taylor Sheridan with the Award of Inspiration at a gala in Dallas, and of course, Keith Urban returned to the stage in Pennsylvania last week as well as his tour continued. And Nicole Kidman has stepped out again with her daughters at the Chanel Spring Fashion Show during Paris Fashion Week. Is that right?
I saw that. She did, and she looked serene, and obviously it was a commitment she had agreed to before the breakup of her marriage was announced, same as the AIDS gala in the US that she went along to, and it just shows what a class act she is. She's not going to let down a sponsor or a charity and hide behind, you know, a very crushing personal situation, obviously. The rest of us would be sitting on the sofa with a tub of Haagen-Dazs, you know, rewatching our wedding videos, but Nicole's not that person. She's very aware of the responsibilities she has as a celebrity and to people who expect her to turn up and show up and actually be there for the brand when none of us really expected to, but she does it and she's a total professional, and I have nothing but admiration for her. I think Keith is obviously going through his own situation as well, and who really knows if there is another woman on the scene. We don't have any proof of that either way, but you see Nicole keeping on and just maintaining that public appearance with her daughters, which is just remarkable.
And Meghan Markle made her Paris Fashion Week debut, and there was this awkward interaction with the Balenciaga creative director. Let's look at this. It's so cringe to watch, isn't it? It's so awkward. But fans are slamming Meghan for this, calling her the Duchess of Hypocrisy for attending Balenciaga's show, seeing as there was a lot of controversy around this brand and an ad that was seen as quite creepy that involved children.
That's right. So the ads were very creepy. They were offensive, actually, more than creepy, I think. And they were children posing with teddy bears in bondage gear. And Balenciaga's brand was in the toilet almost overnight, really. The problem for Meghan in going to a show, even if there is a new creative director she's very, you know, pally with, is that one of her brands is protecting children in the online space. So how do you front up at a fashion show dressed all in white, you know, irony noted, the international colour of innocence? How do you turn up to that show knowing that the brand has this terrible history in the way they've portrayed children with adult themes? And so the Duchess of Hypocrisy, I think is a pretty valid label to attach here.
And she's also, of course, been taking to Instagram, as she always does, sharing lots of pictures. And she posted a story of herself in a limo with her feet up near the Parisian tunnel where Princess Diana tragically died in 1997. Now, what are your thoughts around this? It seems pretty insensitive.
Oh, it is. And it just, to me, it speaks to Meghan's Diana fetish, that if there's ever an occasion for her to pull something out of Diana's history and rev it up in 2025 style to make herself feel relevant, she'll do it. And we all know the single most catastrophic and traumatic event of Harry's life is losing his mother when he was 12, when she was killed in a Paris car crash. So for her to be swanning around in the back of a limousine with her feet up, oh so casual, on social media, not thinking that would have some impact on her husband, or that people would not have the reaction that we've got now, which is completely tone deaf, insensitive, tactless and everything. I mean, if she wanted to make her mark in Paris, why doesn't she go quietly to the hospital who tried, and the staff who tried for 2 hours to save Diana's life back in 1997, and give them a quiet donation for their services? That would be a really
many ways that she could do it.
such a classy way to do it, but no, she's got to jam that privilege down our throats by, you know, driving around in a limousine past the bridge, or nearly at the bridge, where her late mother-in-law lost her life. It's
unbelievable.
Just appalling.
Now, Prince William, it seems that he has broken his silence on the rift with his brother, Prince Harry. So he sat down with comedian Eugene Levy for an episode of The Reluctant Traveller, where he spoke pretty openly about managing family pressures. Listen to this.
Yeah, I think stuff to do with family overwhelms me quite a bit. You know, worry or stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit. But in terms of, you know, doing the job and things like that, I don't feel too overwhelmed by that. Not now, anyway. When I was younger, yeah, there are bits that overwhelm you, a bit like, whoa, are we actually doing this? Is this sort of happening? But with time and age, I think you feel a bit more settled in that side of things, and you go, actually, I could do that.
So it's interesting, he didn't say Harry's name, but he certainly seemed to allude to that rift with his brother, do you think?
Certainly does, yes. And I got a hint that he was probably talking about Charles's rift with Harry as well. And just the dynamic between the two brothers and their dad has just been changed forever. And he's obviously still had to navigate that. But what I also thought was interesting is he's not dwelling on resentment. He's not bitter. If you sort of imagine Harry doing this sort of interview, he'd be very sort of narky and bitter, whereas William's like, I've dealt with it, it has been overwhelming. The fact that he's so refreshing and honest about that, I think, is fabulous for someone who's next in line for the throne. And he's looking for a course of leadership which is based in empathy, I think, as well. So he's very relatable. You sort of watch that thinking, yeah, we'll probably have a bit of family dynamic ourselves at home, although not at that sort of regal level.
Yes.
And the fact that he's sort of being so authentic about that, I thought was fabulous.
Yeah, I think so as well. Now, Prince William and Princess Catherine are heading for their forever home, and it's been revealed that authorities have had to seal off previously publicly accessible land around this lodge to create this exclusion zone. Trespassers who breach the area could end up in handcuffs, and of course there's certain CCTV cameras and wiring that have been installed behind the house. So a lot of security, Louise.
Yeah, look, I think anyone shouldn't be upset with this level of security. There's plenty of other places you can walk around near royal residences without actually invading their space. And I think it's not about privilege, it's about protection. We're looking at a home situation where we have 2 future monarchs living there. So any security, I think, is justifiable. And this is the reality of being in the monarchy in the modern age, that they need that level of security.
Louise Roberts, thank you so much for your time. Great to speak with you. And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.